Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are very excited to have you here today to hear all about voting and your money. This is really, really important for our members. We want everyone to be informed and to understand it's not just about getting customers into your door. That is very, very, very important. But another very important aspect of doing business anywhere in this country is to make sure that you have the right elected officials in place that can support your business. They write the legislation, and our representatives lobby on our behalf to make sure that we have fair and adequate representation concerning what concerns us about business owners. So we welcome you today. We ask that you take copious notes. Make sure you put your questions in the we look forward to answering your questions. And with that, I will turn over this event to our very, very capable moderator and chair of our Advocacy and Policy Committee, Ms. Jerry Brooks.
All right, hello. Happy Wednesday, everybody. How y'all doing out there? Let's give you like a little wave. How you doing out there? I know it's been a long 4 months. Many of us are sitting in our house. And so some of our normal behaviors, like going out to vote or when the normal primary runoff would be, or preparing for our election in November, some of those things aren't happening. So the first thing I want to make sure we just encourage everyone is we've got to vote, y'all. We are currently in the primary runoff. It is not our job to tell you who to vote for, but it is our job to encourage you to vote and to remember, clicking the button without knowing if they represent the issues that we represent as business owners, specifically as Black business owners, your vote is wasted when they're not advocating on our behalf. As you know, there's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of opportunity out there. And so we've gotta cast our vote and get ready. I wanted to start today, before I introduce our esteemed panel of guests, with just a quick story. I recall being a young political strategist and working on a campaign. And you never think about the importance of just one single vote. You know, many of us think if I vote for the presidential campaign or if my one vote doesn't matter. But more so than anything, in local politics, every vote counts. So our current seated senator down here in the Houston, Texas district, did y'all realize that he won a race as a state representative by only 8 votes? That's less than the people on that call. That's less than the number of people who comes to grandma's house. So I just want you to understand the true power of just one vote. And with that, let me get to introducing who we'll be listening to and learning from today. Just because I'm a little old school and that's how my mama raised me, we're going to start with the esteemed Mr. John Guess. Mr. Guess is the president of the Guess Group, which is a premier real estate consulting firm, and it's been around since 1988. He brings over 30 years of local and national experience in matters of commercial real estate, and in particular in acquiring, selling, and developing urban properties. But that's not what's the most interesting about Mr. Guess. Mr. Guess, y'all might not know this, but he was a freedom rider back in the 1960s, y'all. He was a person who's advocated from not only the Houston Real Estate Association, but he was the past president of the 3rd Ward Redevelopment Council. And he was one of the people, Martha, you should make sure you know this, council member, that he was part of the team that revised Chapter 42's redevelopment ordinance. These are things that are incredibly impactful. So one of the reasons that you'll see our panel was developed this way is because we wanted to take multiple generations and learn about the importance of voting. So our first guest today is Mr. John Guess. From there, let me introduce to you one of my absolute favorite people sitting around that council table, the esteemed Vice Mayor Pro Tem, Martha Castak Tatum. She is a warrior for women, for Black folks, for business. Castak Tatum represents the city of Houston with the Texas Municipal League on the board of directors, which means she's not only doing her work down here in Houston, but she's doing the work of the people of Texas. She is the chair of the Economic Development Committee, which means she's the one who's going to help us go get this money. Y'all, and then she is also a business owner. She has a career as a residential and commercial realtor with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. And finally, let me introduce to you to one of our complete and total rising stars, Miss Shakira Dennis, who is a political strategist and public engagement expert with over 10 years of proven leadership experience. She does campaigns, she does engagement, she does social, she does comm. And most importantly, she's a graduate of the Houston Black Leadership Institute. She's a product of the Greater Houston Black. So with that, those are who we'll be listening to today. A couple of housekeeping. If you have a question, please put your question in the chat. Don't wait to the end. Erica will be monitoring that to make sure that we're able to answer any of those particular questions. Mr. Guest, I'm going to start the first question with you, sir. As a freedom rider and civil rights activist from the 60s, you've had an opportunity to observe several decades of issues that face Black community, specifically as it relates to economic empowerment. So we're here today to discuss our vote and our bottom line. Would you share with us, really comparing the 60s through the decades until now, and what have you seen and what type of actions do we need to take to make actual systemic economic change? And how does that all tie into the importance of our vote?
Well, I think it's going to be very important for us to vote. That's the only way we can keep the kind of representation that's necessary at home as well as in Washington, D.C. When we started, or I started in the 60s, kind of makes me a little ancient. And hearing you guys talk, it was quite an explosive era that I came into the civil rights struggle. And yes, I did participate in marches and demonstrations, and even to go down to Montgomery, Alabama, and crazy enough to get involved with the Lyons County voter registration group. And so we've done a lot of work in that area. It is so much different, I think, now than back then, because we did not have a lot of laws that we have now that governs the kinds of protests that you can do, what is allowed, what's not allowed in certain areas. So I think the major thing that helped us was the Voting Rights Act that we have, the fact that we've had the table changed so that we can participate in all phases of business through minority participation requirements by different public entities, meaning schools, colleges, cities, etc. So we have that going for us. The other thing we have going for us is the fact that they business person is better educated than we are, and possibly will have a lot more experience than we had when we first got into sole ownership or partnerships with Black businesses trying to do business in the American business world. So we've come a long way simply just taking advantage of the kinds of opportunities that we currently have. Certainly one big piece was the fact that lending institutions will have to have more minority participation in our loan portfolio than we had during the 60s. In the 60s, we had to look for Black financial institutions if we wanted to try to make a competitive loan. Otherwise, we would have to go to many of the majority financial institutions that, if we could get a loan, we paid higher normal interest rates, and they enforced a larger percentage of our assets as collateral to what we are trying to do, the kind of business we would be going in. So a lot of that has changed. Again, we find that minority businesses now can have an opportunity to do partnerships will allow the major players, not only real estate, but every other kind of business you can think of, because of the public laws that says you have to have minority participation. So I see that as two ways that we have done better. Some ways we've done better gaining access. And of course, on the public side, but we pass legislation that assists us in this situation, in this market. But most of all, we have to vote in order to retain and create more opportunities for people of color to be business people and entrepreneurs in this marketplace.
You know, Mr. Guest, I heard you talk about, the Community Reinvestment Act and the CRA regulations. You talked about participation regulations, and you talked about the importance of voting. But, so often we hear people say, well, that's what goes on in Austin, or that's what goes on in DC. How does that actually impact me right here at home, right here in the heart of Houston, Texas? How is this going to actually put more green dollars into my bank account?
Well, first of all, dealing with the Cooperative Act, or what that forced many of the institutions to now lend to minorities, that affects you right here, right now, because any institution that you go to understand CRA means participation of minorities in their lending policies and procedures. So it helps us locally to hold the major financial institutions' feet to the fire, and it gives us a better chance to get the kind of funds that we need to run our businesses or go into ventures on our own that wouldn't have been available prior to CRA. And so it's important for CRA to stay in place by having government officials and elected officials that promote that kind of legislation. And in fact, that it's there now. If we don't have a proper representation, especially in Congress, you will have a lot of those acts roll back, and executive decisions roll back. You can see exactly what Trump has done since he's been in the presidency as it impact minorities by rolling back a lot of Barack Obama's executive orders that allowed us to participate on many levels in the marketplace.
Thank you for your response. And I do want to remind you all that these are the opinions of those of us who are speaking. The Greater Houston Black Chamber is a nonpartisan organization, and we want to make sure that we are promoting the fact that it's important to vote, and then we'll have our subliminal messages about perhaps one of the greatest presidents of our time. With that, I'm going to come to you, Vice Mayor Pro Tem Castak Tatum. Listen, never, ever, ever in the history of Houston City Council, at least that I can recall, has there ever been 6 seated African-American members on the City Council. Now, clearly, all of us, or many of us, voted for you all, and many people, diverse groups of people, voted to put you into your seats. But tell me, what type of an impact does having 6 African-American members on the Houston City Council, what is our ability to grow? How is that going to significantly change? And or what do we need to do to make sure that you all have the power that you need to draw down and make our bottom line stronger? Mayor Vice Pro Tem?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for having me on the show today. You're absolutely right. Never in the history of Houston City Council have we had 6 sitting African Americans serving at the same time. And basically what that says is we are, as African Americans, we are doing a better job of mobilizing, making sure we demystify what it takes to run for office. If we don't encourage good people to run for office, then we won't have a good representation in these positions. One of the things that is so critically important is that when we get in these positions, that we also encourage other people to run, because quite frankly, what it takes to serve is a willingness to do it. And a lot of people get so turned off by politics because of the ugliness that can come along with serving as an elected official. But we have to be courageous enough to withstand that, break through that, and just go ahead and say, I'm going to do it, because if we don't have good people representing us, then we have to live with the people that do represent us. I think having 6 African Americans on the council is just a testament to the fact that, we aren't only representing African American communities. African-American candidates can represent all Houstonians. The typical look and what people typically thought was the average elected official is changing, just like the world is changing, just like the demographics are changing all over. So we would expect to have representation that looks like the people in the cities that we all govern. The local politics is it's critical. We need people in these seats, in these offices, who will represent how do we impact our quality of life on a daily basis. And so having people that have lived similar experiences to your experiences is a benefit, because I can go directly to my representative and feel like you understand my plight. You know what I need, because you probably at some point in your life needed that exact same thing. So I tell people all the time, there's a unique level of there's just this uniqueness that I have in serving in this role, because I represent my mom and dad. My parents are District K residents. And so I've lived the experience with them. I know what I have to fight for them. I know what I have to fight for my 10th grade science teacher and my 8th grade basketball coach and my friends' parents who I ate dinner at their homes and I see them in Kroger's. And so this level of accountability is unparalleled, because they know me, I know them, I know what they need, and I'm willing to fight for them. And then it also expands our ability for access. So many times we miss out as African-American business owners because we don't know. But when you have people who you connect with, who you can access easily to find out information, it is an opportunity for you to expand your capacity. Serving as the chair of the Economic Development Committee in the city of Houston is a tremendous opportunity to get the word out, especially to organizations like the Greater Houston Black Chamber of Commerce and all of these organizations that as African Americans, we depend on for information. We need to be able to disseminate this information to our communities to help us build capacity and to grow our organizations. And when we have people at the table who can get that information directly to us in a timely manner and make sure our paperwork is correct and make sure we know the right people to talk to, that's the way we'll grow our businesses and help each other to expand our territories.
Well, you know, Mayor Pro Tem, Vice Mayor Pro Tem Cass Tatum, one of the questions, I don't know if everyone knows procedurally how you actually get legislation or ordinance passed at City Council. Now, we talked about this historical ability to have 6 African American people around the table, but and that's, you know, not including the mayor, but that doesn't account for, you need 9 votes. So
you've got to have 9 votes. You've got to have 9 votes. And if we have, you know, 6 African Americans on the council, issues that deal with African American concerns, for the most part, we can expect that between the 6 African American people on the council, you know, we should be able to help to get issues that deal with African Americans passed with, you know, 3 allies. But it takes 9 votes to get anything passed on the city council. And so when you have a block of potential 6 people, you know, you're over halfway there. So making sure that you have people representing you that represent your interests is critically important.
So what I hear you saying is not just the African Americans that we have to make sure they have an opportunity to serve, but also making sure that we connect with our allies, which really takes me to Shakira. You know, first of all, thank you for joining us today, the Young and the Brilliant. Yeah, I don't know if you all know this, but Shakira is part of the prestigious women's campaign school, or participate in the prestigious women's campaign school at Yale, y'all. She's an Ivy League girl. So as a political strategist and business owner, what should Black businesses be thinking about as it relates to growing our businesses, and how important is the vote, and what can we actually do? Like, you're the person who drives people, you know, to the polls. Share with us, as a, you know, you've got a new business, you've started your own business, and that's, you know, super exciting, but talk about the bottom line of voting and getting us to the poll, and what do we need to do? 37 people jumped on this call to say voting matters. Tell us what we need to do to get to the polls and to ensure that the voting correlates to our bottom lines.
Absolutely. I want to address the first part of your question. First, thank the Greater Houston Black Chamber for allowing this platform to take place. It's extremely meaningful and timely, and as a product of the Houston Black Leadership Institute, it's forums like this that I think matter most, and also create pathways for young people like myself to explore the realm of being an actual business owner. So as it pertains to growing your business in the midst of what we know as COVID-19, in the midst of a global pandemic, we've witnessed many small businesses completely close their doors. And we're also witnessing on the other side, small businesses who have to be nimble and identify more creative practices and protocols and really adjust their business practices, right, to actually be in congruence with what currently is being demanded of us as we can't convene in person, right? Identifying how do we exist virtually and how do we actually achieve our intended result as business owners. And so for me, I'll speak personally, as a small business owner, it's really challenged us in a creative and innovative way. And so it's not negatively impacted us, but really pushed us, to that next chapter. And the correlation between voting, I most certainly want to credit Mr. Guest for what he talked about, just laying the framework right around minority participation for minority women business enterprises. But ultimately, the power of the vote matters, and there's some easy local examples, right, that we can really rely upon as it pertains to the business community. If you look at what's going on at the City of Houston, we have Vice Mayor Pro Tem, who's the chair of the Economic Development Committee, but also is intentional about creating pathways for small businesses to thrive and participate. But we also have another governing body, right, the Harris County Commissioners Court, that is just now turning the page, right, on conversations around minority women business participation and access and influence and involvement and what that looks like. And they were intentional in their efforts. Was this always true of that body? Absolutely not. 3 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe even 10 years ago, that was not the reality. And it most certainly was not a part of their conversation or an intentionality in their governance. And now that it's centered, and there's a disparity study that says, look, we actually do need to make sure that we include minority and women-owned businesses, and we actually need to start prescribing actual prescriptions and explore what does the MWBE program look like on the county level, and that access and influence for small businesses to thrive. And we wouldn't have had that had we not, as residents of Harris County and those who in the City of Houston also vote Harris County elections, had not been intentional with our vote and said, hey, we want to change the composition of our Commissioners Court to leaders that actually speak our language and speak our interests, Jerry. And it goes back to what you said, right? We have to be thoughtful about our vote, right? What if we didn't go to the ballot box and completely realign the power and authority of that governing body? Would this conversation of creating avenues for small businesses to actually activate and participate in Harris County be a real thing? I don't think so. I mean, it goes without saying that our vote is powerful. It matters, and we have to be thoughtful about it, and we have to continue to vote early and often in every election without cease.
Yeah, you brought up the diversity, the disparity study, and it's something that I think in Houston we are the most studying to study a study to get one more study to make sure that we can study that study to figure out if that study means what we're going to do. So this is a question to all of the panel. The studies are great. But what do we need to do in terms of getting into action? Where does our advocacy, we're talking about voting today, but it's partly voting, but it's partly advocacy. Where does our advocacy begin after the study ends? How does this document not become something that sits on the table, but I'm looking for another $1 million for the one world, and so is everybody else on this call. How do we convert a study to actual influence and actual capital that allows us to grow our businesses and hire more people, or just help other small businesses get started? And that question is for the entire panel.
So this is Vice Mayor Pro Tem, and I'll jump in and start. I think that the big key is engagement, and engagement is tough, but engagement is a two-way street. You have to, as business owners, engage with your elected officials, engage with the people who have the information that you need to grow your businesses. For example, We are currently working on the Small Business Economic Relief Program through our Economic Development Committee. As this program develops, it is important for small businesses to stay engaged with our committee. Our next meeting is on the 15th of the month, and I'll send that out to everyone. But it's important to know that we are looking at a $15 million grant and loan program to help with small business relief. If I was a small business, I would be tuned into economic development for sure, because what we're trying to focus on are those micro, macro, and small businesses who may not be big banked. These may not be businesses who have had an opportunity to get the PPE loan, but we want to focus on those businesses that have less than 15 employees and engage with them and make sure that they can survive through this pandemic, and that this will be an opportunity for a grant or a loan for them to sustain through this situation. So engagement is critical. And for small businesses, that's tough, because when you are a small business, you're doing the accounting, you're doing the marketing, you're doing the payroll. A lot of times you wear a lot of hats. And I think that we really have to focus on, even looking at some virtual assistants to free you up. So as the owner of a small business, you can go out and be the rainmaker and work on building and expanding the capacity. One of the things I do want to highlight, though, is in our small business economic relief program, one of the eligible points that I need to drive home is that Chamber of Commerce's are also eligible to apply for those grants and that loan. And the reason that we wanted that to be a part of the program is because the Chamber of Commerce is an important part of business development and the support of our ecosystem. And so if we can keep our chambers functioning and vital, we can ultimately keep our small businesses and those businesses that may not be on big bank radars operating and keeping their employees employed.
Mayor, Vice Pro Tem, and I'm going to let the rest of you speak, but I want to bring up a point that you made. You talked about less than 15 employees, and you talked about how hard it is sometimes when you're a small business with not as many resources. So I just want to encourage everyone, you might not be able to make it to every economic development meeting, but they're recorded and they're on the website. You also can just come to your Greater Houston Black Chamber, where we are constantly providing information. If you're not signed up in our newsletter, if you're not going to our website, if you're not following us on social media, you're missing the opportunity. Because what I heard her say is they're going to have $15 million in grants and loans. And as a small business, I'm looking to put some of those coins into my pocket. Shakira, Mr. Guest, any additional comments on this topic?
Well, first of all, I think that engagement is the key word. Many of us want to look to others to help solve our problems and get out and support us, and we not be engaged. That's not the way to do it. You're going to have to get involved with these studies, and the results of those studies, make sure that they are put into action. And because we can volunteer for committees that are needed in that study. If you're talking about small business in that study, then we need to be participating in that. If you're talking about the chamber, we certainly need to see that the chamber is engaged with a lot of these studies around the city, county, state, and the national level. So I think that's key, that we get involved. You just cannot expect a few people to take care of the many. We just have to be engaged at all times.
What's getting involved like? I mean, I think about it like old school. They say, go to your prayer closet and pray. And I just sit in the prayer closet and look at the wall and like, is my time up yet? So what does getting involved really mean for us as busy business owners?
As mentioned before, as it pertains to the disparity study, I want to start there because that is, there was a form of advocacy and engagement as it pertains to that study. And so it's actually been in the works for 2 years, right? It just finally materialized and, hey, here it is, and we're ready to go. This is the rubric, right, for what we'll be using to establish a potential MWBE program on the county level, engagement looks like the business community collectively speaking to the need to take the next step, right? We now have these results. Now, where do we go from here? Right? And there's multiple forms of action that can be taken. I mean, if you want to reach out to your respective county commissioner and say, hey, I saw that there's a disparity study. I'm a small business owner. I'm in your precinct. Can we talk a little bit more about what next steps, will look like? Is there a designated representative in your office that I can continue to engage with, right, on a regular basis, right? I think we have to use our collective influence and power to really move the needle, because I can't tell you how important it would be if it was just maybe an open letter from all of the major, business chambers, here in the city of Houston, across the state, across Harris County, that said, we saw the study, we now want to take the next step. We're here. We do want to talk about what that could look like and what type of opportunities could come about for individuals that are active businesses under our umbrella. Also, the individuals who spoke to the disparity study were heads of chambers and supplier diversity leads, and they really did bring light to the actual need at that commissioner's court meeting. And so I think that applied pressure led to the birth of the study. And now from the study, we have to take the baton and make sure that it really formalizes into an actual program that benefits the business community.
So I heard you say something about an open letter. So I heard you say, use our voices, whether we're showing up to the meetings or sending letters or tagging people in social media. I heard you talk about attending. I heard you talk about following up. But one of the things that no one wants to talk about when it comes to voting and politics and getting to the bottom line is, you got to spend money to make money. So I'm just curious, what is your thought as regards to business owners? Where do we need to be in regards to fundraising or being a part of a fundraiser or supporting? Many of the African-American and particularly members are not going to raise as much as their counterparts, or particular people might be coming against them. So can you be more specific in regards to how does the fundraising piece tie into voting and getting to the bottom line to ensure that once policy is passed, that we've got people moving it forward for us?
I think there's a lot to unpack there, right? Because the relationship between money and politics hasn't always been the most positive one, in the community. And so identifying areas to educate, right? It's particularly in the African American community that says, look, we've got Vice Mayor Pro Tem Martha Castex Tatum that is doing an amazing job representing us, on the local level and making sure that our voices are heard and that our interests are being centered. What can we do to make sure that she's okay and that we support her and that she retains power? Mr. Guest mentioned that earlier. Like, these are sacrifices and conversations about minority participation that's been happening way, before we were ever active in these conversations. But how do we continue to take the baton from what he sacrificed to what he's laid out and many others before us and say, hey, this is the next step, right? This is us taking it and realizing amongst ourselves, yes, we have to contribute to those individuals who represent us and who look like us and who are actually doing the work to keep us centered and heard in a meaningful way in government. So I think that's a start debunking the myth that money in politics is such a negative thing, right? And starting to build a base of young and seasoned leaders who understand the importance of their dollar politically in supporting those folks who really, truly represent our interests.
Ms. How have you seen the difference between money and politics and what's going on now versus back then? And what's the importance? I mean, you've got a very substantial business. Do you have a line item that I'm going to make donations or contribute? Like, talk to us about how fundraising works in regards to growing our businesses.
There's nothing wrong with money in politics. One of the things that as a young, involved business person in the mid 70s, there was a woman by the name of Kathy Whitmire that was running for mayor. And so a group of us got together and said, the real deal is you pay to play. There's no free lunch. And we knew that certain individuals in the city could have an open door to the mayor or any department head because of the support they gave the person in charge. And so we got together a group of young men, and this was probably 78, something like that. And we gave $50,000 to Kathy Whitmire. And that shocked the world because Black folks in Houston were very sorry when it came to putting their money where their mouth was. So that startled the political world, and all of a sudden, they said these individuals have access to money. They have, therefore, they have a voice that can, if not heard, can hurt you. So that was the beginning of our pay-to-play efforts in the greater Houston area. Now, I think that hasn't changed. That's the same thing as it relates to electing Trump. Trump is a very good example of pay-to-play. The millions that supported, millions of dollars that supported Trump in his election in 2016 enabled them to be favorably looked at for any kind of legislation, as well as making available funds or money to their corporations. And that's what the big boys do. We can't do it at that level, but certainly we can have an impact on local politics. They will tell you in a minute, politics is local. And that's what we must remember, that we need to control our votes coming out of Texas, going into Washington. We have to control the individuals in the city of Houston that makes legislation that's going to impact us. But we have to start financially supporting people like Mrs. Tatum, Comer. I'll get it right in a minute, Tatum. I think that
Tatum, yes, sir.
So we have to do this, and I hope that's one thing we remember in talking about this whole situation about playing in the economic arena.
And let me just add something, because I think it's important for people to know that, elections cost money. And in order to win elections, you need money to win, whether you like it or not. The mail-outs cost money, the signs cost money. And so in order to run an effective campaign, you have to have money. But what I don't want people to do is think that if I just don't give any money, I won't have access to my elected official, because you will have access to your elected officials. But I think it's important that the narrative that we put out is people donate to campaigns because they donate for good government. When I donate to someone, I think that person is going to provide good governance for the position that they are running for. I support them. And I tell people all the time, when you hear people say, well, she only does such and such because they gave money to her campaign. No one put more money, time, effort, and sweat into my campaign than I did. And so ultimately, I have to make the best decision that I feel for the citizens that I represent. So I don't want people to correlate the money to campaigns as a negative thing. Campaigns cost money. And if you want your candidate to win, they need money to win. And a lot of times, minority candidates don't raise as much money as some of the other candidates. And if we want to see more candidates representing us that look like us and that represent our values and the things that we believe in and want to support us, we have to make sure that they can compete in the campaign arena effectively.
Yeah, we're at 3:42, so I've got a couple more questions. I want to leave some time if there's anything in the chat. This is a question for all of you all. And since you're talking about Mayor Vice Pro Tem elections, let's get into it. We are facing one of the most talked about elections in recent history, especially as it relates to the future of Black America. We've watched our brothers get killed in the streets, in their homes. We've experienced cruelty of a society marked with social and economic inequities. We've even elected the first African-American president already. So what can we do to motivate Black people to get to the polls, to get out to vote, now in the primary, but even more so in November? I mean, what else is it going to take at this point to understand the power in just one vote? And that question is for everybody.
Well, I say this all the time, democracy is learned. And so we can never stop teaching our next generation about the importance of democracy. And so although sometimes, you feel exhausted and you just say, oh my goodness, what else is it going to take for people to go to the polls? We have to continue teaching democracy and the importance of the vote. And I post it periodically, and I say it to my nephew and my nieces, you know, there won't be any dogs, there won't be any water hoses, you won't have to pay a poll tax, because they don't know what that means. They don't know the impact of what our ancestors went through for us to gain the right to vote. And I think we have to emote that feeling for them so that they really understand how precious the vote really is. But they won't know that if we don't teach them that. And so we can't get fatigued. We can't be tired of talking about it. We have to continue to educate, encourage, entice, drive, register, and get people to the polls. And we just can't get weary while doing it.
And I think that engagement is going to be very, very important in moving forward in this century, this new century, because it's going to be important, because we in the past, and I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way, but we in the past have been victims of what I call compliant Negroes. When I say compliant Negroes, we're talking about those that get appointed to boards and commissions and even elected that are compliant. There was a study done at Harvard, I think it was in the early 80s, where the thought was, how do you control the Black community, the Black race, the Black interests in America? And when one of the answers that came out of that study of Harvard said, elect or appoint compliant Negroes. Because what happens is that that individual will normally run in a certain circle of Black folk. And they are normally the mid-income individuals, the more educated individuals. And so that compliant Negro is a member of that circle. So those Black folks that should have some ability to enforce or even create the kind of legislation or rules and regs or gifts given to the Black community for economic development, they might have them, but because you have a compliant Negro in place, it doesn't get done. And the big thing is, again, I thought was really smart on their part, was to say, find that compliant Negro and we will completely neutralize that educated voice coming from the minority community. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be all Black folks. It could be brown folks, so it runs across the board. But I guarantee you, we need to make sure, in whatever efforts we do, that we get more people of substance in those positions, like Mayor Pro Tem Tatum. She is smart, she's aggressive, and I don't see her being compliant with everything and everybody in a political position that possibly would have some influence going forward on our marketplace.
So, Mr. Guest, you said, let me affirm that she is, and by no way and by no means, a compliant Negro. That is what we 100% about this particular mayor, vice mayor pro tem. But here's a question. People always ask me, if they've got a Black face, and maybe this is for Shakira or Martha or any of you, if you've got a Black face, I mean, like, are we just supposed to be voting for Black people? What do y'all, because you're saying Black, but it's not just about Black, right? What is it really about? What are we looking for, Shakira?
I think I also just want to touch on what Mr. Guest and Vice Mayor Pro Tem Castex Tatum spoke to, right? The need to really actually expand the conversation around political education, right, in our community, and actually creating more pathways, right, for like-minded individuals to participate in the conversation of building Black political power, right, not just across the city of Houston or across Harris County, but across the state of Texas, right, and leading as a national example of what that could look like. Last year, Jerry and many of you know, who were participating, many of the panels who were participating, we hosted a Black campaign school, right? So that gives us a little bit more of a granular, right, effort to sustain, build, train, engage, mobilize our own, right? And so you get a 50,000 foot view, but also a micro level view into who are we actually training, right? To look at city council positions, right? Positions in our state legislature, positions in county government, right? And how are we thinking about this actually working in the coming years, right? Around conversations of issues that we know primarily impact our community. I think this is a great time, right, to really take a deeper dive into that. We have, as we mentioned before, a strong African American contingency around the horseshoe at City Council, and I witnessed them collectively work together to identify meaningful ways to address police brutality and accountability in our city, right? That's a major move, and it hasn't been done. So things like that around, do they just look like us, or are they actually going to be advocates, for us? I mean, it's evidentiary that we have folks around that horseshoe who not only look like us, but do care about our interests and our issues, right? But we have to continue that conversation in a real way and continue to educate and continue to encourage those who may be interested in public office to learn more about the reality of what that actually is.
Yeah.
Well, y'all, I was reading, there was a May 2020 Washington Post, I'm actually going to read this quote, article, and it stated that the number of working African American business owners in the United States plummeted by more than 40% as the coronavirus shut down much of the economy. It's a steeper drop than any other racial group experienced. According to any analysis confirming the fears of the pandemic, this would actually deepen the inequalities in the business world. And then further, according to the National Bureau of Economic Research, approximately 440,000 Black businesses in the U.S. shut down from February through mid-April. So we're here to talk about voting and about our bottom line today, but how does literally one individual vote, is there something that could have happened from your individual vote, and to Shakira's point, a collective vote that could have helped save almost 500,000 Black businesses? And from that, how do we continue to stabilize the Black community? How does the vote and the stabilization and ensuring that Black businesses stand in these times or any times, how does that all correlate together? And the questions for the entire panel.
I'll take a stab at it. I think that what we've witnessed as it pertains to government response, right, in communities of color who's already suffering in many ways from systemic inequalities, right? And we all know who COVID-19 is impacting, right? And that's our community at a disproportionate rate, and which was already amplified by some of our pre-existing healthcare challenges and also healthcare disparities that have long existed in communities of color. As it pertains to a government response from a federal level, we were too little too late, right? There was not an actual intentional effort to really address COVID-19 before it got to where we are now, to the stage of where it's a global pandemic. But also we think about a federal government response. Let's talk about the Small Business Administration, right? Who has the authority, right, and the power to control who leads our Small Business Administration, right? Which had the opportunity to provide so much relief to save many of the businesses that are now closing their doors. And instead, as Mr. Guest mentioned, right, pay to play is being demonstrated through our active president, right? And so we see clear, defined examples of his friends benefiting from PPP, who are already millionaires, while we bear the grunt of closing the doors of our businesses and trying to figure out how we're going to make ends meet. So we want to talk about the collective power of our vote and what we could have done. And I mean, I think as African Americans in our community, we are activating our vote, right? But we've got to do just a little bit more, right? To capture those individuals who aren't in our circles, who aren't as engaged, who do not rely upon the conventional means of targeting and engagement. And how are we getting into the weeds and figuring out how to touch them? How do we get a message that sticks? And how then, from this government response, do we transfer this energy into an actual movement and actual votes that can uproot the existing leadership that we know now for a fact is not speaking our interests or care about whether or not Black businesses thrive across this nation?
And let me just add to that. I will tell you, over the last several months, seeing the intentional desire of people who want to support Black businesses, I have never seen this in the history of my life. But over the last several months, there have been articles in the Chronicle. There are, Facebook pages. There's social media movement to support Black businesses. And I think when we are intentional about supporting our own and supporting our communities, we will see a shift. And so we have people in the elected offices. We have people who are running businesses. We have people who are willing to support. We just have to be intentional about making it happen and helping each other along the way. And I think that, what I've seen over the last couple of months, I would venture to say that a lot of African-American owned businesses are seeing people who they haven't seen in traditional times supporting their businesses, because we want to be more intentional about supporting each other.
Yes, I agree that we have to do that. But also, you're talking about the vote, one vote. I think about Senator Scott from the Carolinas, Tim. I know Tim. They have carved him up and put him out front of all of these so-called assistance packages that's coming in that is supposed to represent the needs of the minority communities, not only Black. I wonder what vote wasn't taken that Tim would be representing us in the Senate. How did those people in, I've forgotten, North or South Carolina won that he's representing? I'm trying to find out what happened that a smart, aggressive Black man is a Republican. Not saying that smart people can't be Republican, but I question their IQs. But anyway, the fact that that guy is now up there and the people who put him there is really controlling him. So one vote is very important. Though if the votes in South Carolina would have been in the right direction, which meant him ascending through the Democratic Party, he would be representing us more than what he's trying to do now. So our prayer should go out to Scott, because he's going to be have a a dot on his forehead going forward. So I just pray for him. But because of the voting patterns in those states, we now have one Black senator who is being sacrificed in this whole campaign.
So I want to first thank all the panelists for joining us today. We're not quite done. I think, Erica, you said there are some questions in the chat box. But one of the things I want to say before we go to that question is, when people come and ask us as Black business owners, when our white, brown, yellow, green colleagues and allies want to ask us, how can you help? You can vote for people who represent the issues that we care about, but you can do what I really like to call real life reparations. Hire our businesses. Erica, we'll take the first question.
Yes, so we have a question here for Vice Mayor Pro Tem Castex Tatum. It says, I'm a small business owner and would like additional information on the committee meeting for July 15th.
All right, so go ahead and shoot an email to my office at districtk@houston.tx.gov. And that's for anyone listening on the call, and we'll add you to our Economic Development Committee distribution list. And so whenever we send out information from the committee, you'll be on that distribution list. That's districtk@houston.tx.gov.
And that's also in the chat box for anyone who didn't catch it.
And there is, yeah, so the next question would also be to you as well in regards to the 15 million in funding that you were discussing a little bit earlier, reiterated.
Okay. What's the question?
Question about just reiterating, what was the 15 million in funding that you were discussing?
Okay, it's a small business relief program that the city is working with the Office of Business Opportunity and the Office of Economic Development. And it will be for small businesses. We're gonna focus on the micro small business, which is organizations that have 5 or fewer employees, the mid-small business, that's organizations with less than 15. And it's just going to be an opportunity for us to provide grants and loans to organizations that may not be big banked, maybe organizations that did not qualify for the PPP loan program. And it'll be an opportunity for you to apply for some funding to help to sustain during this time of COVID-19. So we are looking to take the program to council mid-July. We do have to disseminate the money. We want to have the money disseminated before October of 2020. So stay on the lookout, get on our distribution list. So as soon as that information is available, I will send that out to all of the businesses on our distribution list.
And Vice Mayor Pro Tem, do I need to be registered at the city, or we'll get more of those details later on?
Yes, I will send that information out. If you are engaged with the Office of Business Opportunity, you'll start, once the program goes to council and it's approved, then you'll see the flyer, you'll get all the information and the details, how to actually apply. But you know, we talked about making this as simple as possible for small businesses. We're not looking to make something very cumbersome for people to apply for the money. We know how many people are struggling through these economic times, and we wanted the process to just be enough information to know that you have a business, your business is working to sustain itself, and you need a little help to get you through this pandemic. And we want to make sure that we are keeping as many people employed in the city of Houston that we can. We know that these small businesses are the lifeblood of our economy, and we have to do our part to keep people on the payrolls in these businesses.
Eric, I think you said there's one final question before we close out, because you know we are business owners, so our time is our money, and we want to be respectful of everyone's time today. What is the final question for the day?
Yes, our final question is, what's the best way to combat our apathy? My fear is that this is a virtual movement ripe for derailment, and that's for everyone.
How to combat apathy? You know, that's a complex question, because you know, most of the people that I hang out with are not apathetic. So it is going to take us talking to each other, engaging with each other, and the constant education. I think that is where our power lies, and we can't, you know, like I said before, grow weary of teaching and encouraging and motivating and giving examples and helping people to be a part of the process. If you know people that want to see city government work, call us. These are the things that we would love to share with our young people. You know, prior to COVID, you know, we had tours in our office. We brought people to City Hall. We did all of that to encourage people to participate in their government, so they could know the impact they can make in their government. So I would just say, you know, don't grow weary in teaching and encouraging people to do their part. I mean, the vote is precious. We've got to go to the polls. We can't say it enough. It's important to be a voter. Be a voter. It is so important.
Well, panelists, you know, one of the things in our prep, y'all, an undisclosed generation represented on this call to really help us understand the importance of voting, not only when you're 18, but when you're just a hair past 50 or 60. And so with that, I want to thank our chairwoman Carol Guest, who, you know, her leadership and through her brilliance, really wanted to make sure that we were talking about this. Y'all do not forget, we are actually in voting season right now. November is coming, and we're going to have to deal with November, but we are currently in voting season. If you have not gotten out to vote, please do. Last thing I'll say is there is a movement out there called When We All Vote. You know, Shakira talked about local, but there's also this larger and being able to collaborate. We've got to collaborate on our Black dollars. We've got to collaborate on our Black voices. We've got to do more JVs and business deals. Like, we can't get it all by ourselves until we grow our capacity. So if we do all these things, if we get in the habit of being the tribal people of which we come from, collaborating which we come from, then we can encourage the vote. And if we have to drag them out, y'all, we got to drag them out, because our bottom line and our business depends on that. And with that, I'll yield the floor to our great and honorable chairwoman, Carol Guest.
Well, thank you, Jerry. I want to thank all of our panelists, first of all, because they're all very, very busy people. They're super intelligent and probably were on this call thinking of how they're going to make money, and Vice Mayor Pro Tem was thinking about that next piece of legislation she was going to get passed. So we appreciate all of you all for being on the call today. What I do want to say is this chamber does advocate, and we need your support financially to continue to do so. So please keep in mind, Mr. Guest said you have to pay to play. Let me put it this way. Money is the currency that floats through politics.
Amen.
So we want to do more advocating like this, like what we presented today on your behalf. And just so you know, we have been putting our 2 cents in with regard to the disparity study, and also the new Office of Economic Equality and Opportunity that Harris County is putting in place that is supposed to debut this fall. So that's part of what we do through the Advocacy and Policy Committee, and also as your chamber. So if you want to see more of these things happen, then we need your support. We need you to talk us up in the community. We need to become thought leaders in the community, and those things do take funding. So you can make a tax deductible contribution to our foundation, which will assist us in these endeavors. I want to thank Jerry very much for her leadership. Jerry Brooks, One World Strategy Group and Pinnacle Award winner. Thank you for your enthusiasm in working with us to get this together today. I want to just make a few announcements. First of all, the Pinnacle Awards applications are coming up, so please look out for those. And if you want to be in the league with Mr. Guest and with Jerry Brooks, make your application. HoustonByBlack.com. That is where we have a directory of all of our member businesses. Please patronize our businesses. Let other people know that this directory exists. We also have a listing of our member businesses on our website at GHBCC.com. That's GHBCC.com. Keep up with us on social media. As Jerry mentioned, we always have information going out about programs that can support your business with grants and with loans, especially during this time. So please keep up with us at Greater Houston Black Chamber or Houston Black Chamber on Instagram. So I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. Please let someone know how this seminar helped you in your business. Please stay engaged in the political process. We have to push through November. So make sure you vote. Early voting ends on July 10th. Election day is July 14th. Pay attention to the candidates. We have a couple of chamber chats on our website for the Democratic primary between MJ Hagar and Royce West, where I interviewed them about their platform for African Americans. So please take a look at that on our Facebook page. And with that, I have no further comments, and thank you for continuing to support the chamber.
Thank you all. Good night.
Good night.